Welcome, we're glad to have you here. Patch 3.20 introduced some exceptionally unique items, one of which is the Winds of Fate staff. With this weapon equipped, your critical strike chance is capped at 50%, and non-critical strikes deal no damage at all. In return, it has very solid stats. It can reach over 1100 physical DPS. The obvious downside of dealing a lot of damage, but only half the time, makes it an unpredictable and unpleasant weapon. Turns out that it's no better than a 10C staff if we leave it at that. To control it, equip the Plume of Pursuit helmet, which makes the final repeat of any spell always a critical strike. To actually benefit from the high DPS of the Winds of Fate when using a spell, you will need a Battlemage buff, and with the helmet slot already occupied, it has to come from Inquisitor's Instrument of Virtue Ascendancy Keystone. You will need to make a spell repeat, link any eligible spell with Spell Echo. With Inevitable Judgment and full elemental damage conversion from skills, focus more on elemental damage, as chaos damage will not be as good. You can control what type of damage you're dealing. With Glacial Cascade that's used here, it's always cold damage. The spell we've selected is Glacial Cascade, but there are a lot more options. Remember, when choosing a spell, it's only important for it to have base physical damage. The built-in skill gem conversions, if there are any, will always take priority over other sources of conversions. That includes the staff. The build uses a big pool of maximum life mixed with energy shield with a good regeneration rate of these resources, and that's pretty much it. We haven't managed to fit the determination aura, but it's feasible with some tinkering. A staff also grants the 18% block chance. Clear speed is below average as you're required to cast the spell twice, and only the second repeat deals damage. It kills even rare monsters with a single blow. Single target damage is great, as you can funnel your resources into very specific traits with no regard for crit chance or penetration. We tried to make it cost-effective. It uses a bunch of uniques and only 3 rare gear pieces, mostly for resistances. These uniques should be cheap. The unique items that are necessary for the build to function are Plume of Pursuit and the Winds of Fate. Maryland's Fallacy is pretty much a must-have too, since it outclasses any other amulet. Other unique items serve the purpose of increasing spell damage by various other means, such as adding extra damage that's sourced from the giant base physical damage pool. Plume of Pursuit is one of the core items. It guarantees a critical strike on the second repeat of a spell, no matter how low your critical strike chance is. The initial spell casts will deal no damage at all. The Winds of Fate is a staff with enormous amounts of base physical damage and built-in global damage conversion. It introduces a crit chance cap and the inability to deal damage with non-critical strikes, but with Plume of Pursuit and the damage already converted, most of these modifiers have no effect. Only its damage and crit multiplier matter. Skin of the Lords increases the level of socketed gems, which is often the most efficient way to gain more damage. It increases armor, evasion, and energy shield. It's the armor we've used in the footage. Incandescent Heart grants more life and up to 20% of physical damage as extra chaos damage, which is powerful to some degree. To wear it, it's recommended to have good chaos resistance and a somewhat high energy shield. Maryland's Fallacy is the single best amulet that specializes in single target damage. It magnifies your crit multiplier by over 200% and grants Culling Strike. Ming's Heart could be one of the strongest items for this build. It reduces your life and ES by a lot, but if you're willing to sacrifice these defensive stats, you will be rewarded with up to 60% of physical damage as extra chaos damage. If your other ring is influenced by Elder, use Mark of the Shaper ring for increased spell damage, maximum life, and energy shield. Replica Soul Tether Belt. Corrupted Soul grants you more energy shield sourced from maximum life in a similar way to the other modifier on this very belt, but thrice as powerful. It's extremely good for a hybrid build with Pious Path. Hands of the High Templar. On this item, you can seek mods such as curse enemies with appropriate hex curse on hit, increased cast speed, increased maximum life, and increased maximum energy shield. Use Brutal Restraint Jewel mainly for more dexterity, sock it in near endurance or instability notables. If you haven't equipped Replica Soul Tether, use Glorious Vanity, the Doriani variant, and transform one of your keystones into Corrupted Soul. Gain 30 to 40% of physical damage as a random element if you've cast Elemental Weakness in the past 10 seconds, is one of the most powerful additions to this build you can gain from a jewel, that is the Balance of Terror. Instrument of Virtue, Inevitable Judgment, or Pious Path will be essential. You can get them via a pair of Forbidden Jewels. Go for the cheapest one, but keep in mind that Righteous Providence is pretty much useless, so acquiring Inevitable Judgment from these jewels allows you to save 2 points and obtain more useful keystone. With Inevitable Judgment, you certainly want to focus more on elemental damage, as this type of damage will ignore all resistances. If that's the case, use a spell like Glacial Cascade to ensure 100% conversion to cold, or another type of elemental damage. Keep your spell damage, gem level, and physical or elemental damage high. Critical strike chance has no value. Critical strike multiplier is extremely good as all your hits are critical. Rare body armor is a good option. It's capable of high life and resistance bonuses, extra gem level for active skills, extra curse, and mana cost reduction. You should use at least one rare ring, as it's a great source of attributes, resistances, and other rare mods like curse on hit or reduced mana cost of skills. Movement speed, maximum life, and elemental resistances are basic modifiers that can be found on most of the boots. Elusive and Tailwind mods will be of use too. On a rare belt, look only for the basic life and resistances. Strength is easy to get, and it may be needed too. Gloves. Basic mods for life and resistances are enough. Chance to unnerve enemies for 4 seconds on hit can be introduced as Exarch's implicit. Inspired Oppression and Sadist are the most valuable notables to be found on large cluster jewels if you can cause Ignite and Shock. It can be achieved by adding damage as extra fire or lightning. We've used 2 of such jewels. If you need an increased mana reservation efficiency for Hatred or Determination, pick a small cluster jewel with one of the listed notables. Use jewels for an increased maximum life, attributes, resistances, and more DPS. Cast speed or increased spell damage are examples of the offensive modifiers you can get. There are some unique flasks that you can equip. Use Atziri's Promise for more chaos damage, sourced from all the other types of damage, which you are capable of dealing. It's also a source of life leech and extra chaos resistance. Sin's Rebirth's Unholy Might grants 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage. It removes burning and provides you with more evasion rating. Taste of Hate grants up to 15% of physical damage as extra cold damage, and reduces cold damage taken. For other flasks, you could use a life flask for instant life recovery on use, a silver or quicksilver flask for more movement speed, or a granite flask for more armor. These should increase your cast speed, armor, movement speed, or remove bleeding. Glacial Cascade, a spell that converts all of its physical damage to cold. It's quite thin, so you can use the Divergent version for more AoE. Link it with Controlled Destruction support, as its only downside has no effect, Divergent Spell Echo support, which repeats linked spell and grants more damage so that the spell actually is being repeated. Other support gems are Empower, added fire damage, and Hypothermia. We've used 5 skills that reserve mana. Herald of Purity grants more physical damage. The minions are not particularly valuable. Herald of Ash increases and grants more fire damage, grants 15% of physical damage as extra fire damage, and burns enemies around the one that dies. Herald of Ice adds and increases cold damage. Frozen enemies will explode on death, dealing area damage. Hatred grants 25% of physical damage as extra cold damage, and more cold damage. It's very difficult to keep up with the mana costs. Use Clarity to regenerate it faster. Link them all up with Enlightened support. Level 1 Tornado will only be used to make use of the linked support gems. It will automatically chase after enemies hitting them. Link it with level 1 Cast when damage taken as well. Link it with Onslaught and Culling Strike support gems. If you already have a Culling Strike or Onslaught, these can be swapped for Blind or Overcharge support. Flame Dash is a basic movement skill you can use to teleport over a short distance. Molten Shell is a guard spell that mitigates a portion of incoming hit damage for some time. It's able to absorb more damage the more armor you have. If you don't have that much armor, use Steelskin instead. Link them with increased duration and Arcane Surge support. Keep Arcane Surge at a low level so that it will apply with a singular use of one of its linked skills. It grants more spell damage and increases the mana regeneration rate. Curse enemies with Assassin's Mark to make them receive more damage from critical strikes. You can use Vol Haste for a temporary bonus to your attack, cast, and movement speed. Vol Righteous Fire removes a big chunk of your life and energy shield but provides you with more spell damage for the next 4 seconds. You can either kill all the bandits and receive 2 bonus passive skill points, or help Alira for crit multiplier, mana regeneration, and elemental resistances. Both are equally good. For a major god we've selected Soul of Lunaris as it helps with clearing, increases your movement speed and reduces physical damage taken in crowded areas. As the character without armor can easily be killed with a single hit, we've picked Soul of Garukin to reduce the shock effect and minimize the chance of dying in such a way. The passive skill tree is able to accommodate 2 cluster jewels. Its main goal is to gather elemental damage, cast speed, maximum life with some energy shield on the side, and mana reservation efficiency. It's a simple one. Pick the 2 masteries for more maximum life, physical damage as extra elemental damage as elemental mastery, critical strike multiplier against unique enemies as critical mastery, increased damage for each aura or herald, or increased effect of auras as reservation mastery, and for the caster mastery, you can pick increased AoE on a final spell's repeat. Thank you for watching. It's a build with limitations, but good if the prices of core items are favorable. Stay safe, and see you in the next one.